Conspiracy theories have largely dominated the last 4 years of Mr. Trump's presidency. The president most recently appeared to incite thousands of backers that support his baseless claims of election interference, and some took their complaints right to Congress by storming the U.S. Capitol building. To talk more about the latest conspiracy theories making the rounds, let's bring in Dan Romer. He is the research director of the Annenberg Public Policy Center. Thank you so much for joining us, Dan. So as we pointed out, the president has quite regularly promoted, retweeted various conspiracy theories throughout the past 4 years. When you saw what happened yesterday to the Capitol building, at the Capitol building, do you see this in a way as the chickens coming home to roost, a culmination of, the man in the highest office in the land reinforcing and legitimizing a host of conspiracy theories?
Well, yeah, he clearly has appealed to people's tendencies to accept conspiracy theories, and it's worked for him in terms of building his political base. And I think we've seen evidence of the willingness of his supporters to invade capitals. I mean, they invaded the Michigan Capitol earlier last year. And this, in a way, what happened yesterday, I guess as you put it, is just a further demonstration of how his supporters have accepted some of his assertions about conspiracies and are willing to act on them.
What's remarkable is that the President of the United States has access to information that most of us can only dream about. Some of the smartest, most intelligent people on the planet work in our intelligence agencies. They are part of our military. They're part of our law enforcement. And yet he traffics in these conspiracy theories. And I've got to wonder, is it because he actually believes it, or he knows? And I know I'm sort of asking you to speculate, but there's got to be a way that when you're looking at these conspiracy theories and how they spread online and how they spread even, without being online, of how people think about them. So my question is, I guess, does he actually believe these things, or he just uses them as a tool?
It's hard to say. I think what he's found is that he has success in at least acknowledging some of these without explicitly supporting them. And this is a source of political support for him. And it's very difficult. It's been very difficult for him to walk away from some of these conspiracies, and in particular, the one about how the election really, was fabricated or, invented by a conspiracy. And every time he's been challenged in some way, like with the pandemic and then with the election, he resorts to these conspiracy theories. You could argue it's because he finds them, useful for his own political gain. Whether he truly believes them or not is something I don't know, and I can't say one way or the other.
The president has been, over the past few years, particularly focused on Antifa. Blaming, and him and his supporters blaming Antifa for some of the violence that we saw during the summertime with the Black Lives Matter movement. And now, this morning, I'm hearing more and more about Antifa being part of the crowd yesterday. Earlier today on CBSN AM, I spoke to somebody who attended one of the rally. She sort of said that she was just a regular person who believed there was something wrong with the election and didn't want to participate in any violence. But then she started talking about Antifa being a part of the crowd, instigating. And when I pointed out to her that, we saw lots and lots of video of the people inside the Capitol building and no one there had an Antifa flag, it didn't seem to register. Why do you think the president and his supporters are particularly focused on Antifa?
Well, this is another conspiracy theory, and it becomes handy at this point because, what happened yesterday, people who support the president, despite what he did yesterday, will look for other conspiracies now to explain or rationalize what happened yesterday. And so I think they're jumping onto that story, even though, from what we can tell, there didn't seem to be much of that kind of evidence of those kind of supporters there yesterday, as far as I can see on the TV.
Yeah. And Dan, as you know, some QAnon believers and conspiracy theorists were actually elected into federal office in 2020. So even though the president leaves office in less than 2 weeks, the question, of course, is, could these conspiracy theories continue to pervade government and the beliefs? Because, at the end of the day, somebody made this point yesterday, which is that it's some of these supporters and some of these people who turned up yesterday, they are seeing things appear in their feed on a regular basis that misinforms them. Things that appear in their feed that are false. Images that appear in their news feeds that are doctored. Speeches and sound bites taken out of context. And if all that they consume is information from their various social media feeds, and then you have the President of the United States on top of that encouraging what it is that they read and they see and they consume, it's hard to sort of say to some of those people who turned up yesterday, not the ones who were violent, but the ones who actually legitimately believed that the election was rigged or that the election was stolen. And let's not forget, Donald Trump has been saying things like this practically his entire life in the public eye. Whenever he has been confronted with facts in something that he has alleged, that's part of what conspiracy theorists do. They turn the tables on you and say, well, that's got to be wrong. You're wrong. That newspaper is wrong. That reporter is wrong. Ted Cruz is wrong. And they turn the table. So in some ways, it's hard to, believe that these people are not going to continue to believe these conspiracy theories because that's what they're consuming.
Absolutely. And I think you're right that people will continue to be exposed because of the way they consume media, especially conservative media at this point in time. They will be continually exposed to stories that support various conspiracies, and it's going to be a challenge for this country to deal with people with those views. And I think it's going to be a real challenge for the new president because this is not a small proportion of the country that endorses many of these conspiracies. It's a sizable proportion. And unfortunately, during the current president's time in office, the Republican Party has sort of turned a blind eye towards these ideas and effectively adopted them in terms of their political goals. So without the president around anymore, hopefully the Republican Party will move away a bit from some of these conspiracies and sort of tamp down the enthusiasm of the people who were the base for Trump.
Dan, you point out that there's an awful lot of people who kind of subscribe to this stuff, and we saw some of the most extreme versions yesterday, but there are regular folks who, might pick up on one conspiracy theory or another. Intelligent people with high education, if that makes you intelligent, people who are good citizens, they pay their taxes on time. What makes people vulnerable to conspiracy theories?
Well, in our current environment, what we've seen is there's this phenomenon called conspiratorial thinking. And people who hold these kinds of thought patterns will agree to statements like, much of our lives are controlled by plots hatched in secret places. Like 20% of Americans will say that's either probably or definitely true. And if you hold a belief like that, you're going to be susceptible to various other kinds of concrete conspiracies. So if you have a general tendency to believe those, and right now in our current political environment, it's younger people who are less educated, lower income, politically conservative, and actually non-white in many cases, who will subscribe to beliefs like this. And they're susceptible to conspiracy theories when they are promoted by powerful people.
It's so interesting, Dan, and I know we got to wrap it up, but for many, many years, we in this country thought we were immune to some of the things that we had seen play out over the last 10 or 15 years in other countries. For example, I've done countless stories when I was based outside of the U.S. on young men and women who were recruited by terrorist organizations in northeastern Nigeria, in other parts of the world, and we in the U.S. would write the stories and report on the stories similar to what you just said. Well, these are people who don't have a lot of opportunities, and they're taken in by these charlatans who encourage them to conduct acts of mayhem. And now we're seeing it play out in the United States, which just sort of says to me that we are not all that far removed from the rest of the world, just as human beings living in a society. Dan, thank you so much, as always, for your insight. We appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you for having me.